There is a better way.
Hmm.
There is a better way. And if you're searching for that way, uh, the path for me, and it doesn't mean it's the path for everyone, that has created more fulfillment and had a greater impact than probably my first 2 decades combined,
Hmm.
is establishing my leadership principles. These are the things that we'll be known for. These are the things that you can expect from me. They're the things I can expect from you. Again, principles aligning around our fundamental truths. So if you're curious for a better way to find that better way, job one is establishing those principles. What can the team expect from me? And what do
Hmm.
I expect from them? That's to me number one. Then it's, as we mentioned earlier, it's not a light switch. I don't make the choice and establish these principles. I got to communicate them. I got to set expectations around them. I got to live them every single day, every interaction. So that's probably the one and only thing I would love for folks to take away. I happen to have created some principles that have been really, really helpful in my personal and professional lives. And at this point, via the book, having sold tens of thousands of copies, I'm convinced.
Congratulations, by the way. That's
Thank you.
awesome.
Thank you very. I'm convinced that these principles, the 10 We's, have a place in the world. And if you're struggling to find what your leadership principles look like, give these a try.
Welcome to this week's episode of Leadership Soundbites with my very special guest, Kyle McDowell. So, Kyle is, and if you go to look at his LinkedIn profile, a history of being in executive leadership for a few different organizations. And he refers to it as former, right?
Mm.
And where you are now is best-selling author and keynote speaker or speaker. I met you through, you were on Bethany Reese's podcast of Leadership on the Rocks. You and I had an intro call that we now realize we were separated at some point in our lineage because we're siblings. So you're my much younger brother, and I will claim you every day of the week.
And I will
Freaking
take it.
loved, thank you. I freaking love chatting with you. I know you have a quote for us, and I would love to hear about how where you talked about, I took a turn to where I'm, best-selling author, speaker,
Yeah.
but it feels like this evolution, or when you chatted, this explosion onto the scene of there's a bigger impact here than what
Mm.
I'm currently making. So welcome to the conversation, and I look forward to having it.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Michelle. And I want to put a finer point on a comment you made. So, as we discussed when we first met, I do a lot of podcasts. I guess on a lot of podcasts, and um, not all of them, but some of them have that pre-intro call, and
Hmm.
that intro call is usually 10, 15 minutes. I think you and I were on the phone for maybe an hour.
It was.
So it's
Yeah.
just cool to meet somebody with, similar kind of paradigm towards the world.
Hmm.
And it's just even more fun when you and I discovered that our approach to leadership and what we do is very, very similar. So
Hmm.
I'm honored to be with you. Thank you for the opportunity.
Right back at you. Thank you. So you have a quote that's got a
Yeah,
history for you, and I would love for you to share it with people.
yeah. So of of an infinite number of quotes, when you asked me, I was kind of flat-footed, but it is one that jumps out and is always kind of there in my brain. And it's something I learned from my mother. My mom was an executive in her own right, and she had this, I think it was a plaque, if memory serves. My mom's been gone for more than a dozen years now, but
Hmm.
the quote was, "Tough times never last, but tough people do."
Hmm.
Which was really cool because my mom began her career as a secretary and just said yes to a lot of opportunities to the point where she was leading hundreds, maybe I don't know, several hundred people.
Hmm.
So that was kind of always a business thing for her. Hey, we're in the middle of adversity. We're going to get through this. Tough people last. But it transitioned into more of a personal thing for her because when she was diagnosed with cancer, it was something we talked about a lot. This is a tough time, and we're going to do our best to get through it. Ultimately, she lost that fight, but it's just funny how some of the more important cliches or sayings or quotes, whatever, they transcend whatever it is the topic that we're on, right?
Hmm.
It's not a leadership, it's a human thing. So that quote's always stuck with us, my whole family actually.
Hmm. It's interesting to talk about that, and I collect quotes. And the quotes that I collect are the ones that make me pause. I mean, it's just like because it someone had a way of saying something in such a way that it was like Yes. Yes,
Resonates.
exactly. And
Almost like
so
it was written for you.
yes, and it's those things that you look at it. So I don't have to have the whole story just to have this. Because when you say that quote, or when you hear that quote, or when you think of that quote, it will take you back to several moments in
That's right.
time.
That's
So
right.
you don't have to have someone telling you the whole story around everything. It's just here's the quote and boom, right there.
That's right. And you know what's kind of cool about that? You reminded me, I'm kind of a music nerd and I like the behind the scenes, like how songs are developed. Did it take them 5 minutes in the studio or was it a labor of 2 years? And in many interviews with some of my favorite artists, you'll hear them say, I'm not going to tell you what this song is about. This song
Mm,
might mean something different to Michelle than it does to Kyle, and that's okay because our perception is what lands, is what drives where we land. So I think it's applicable to, it might mean one thing to you, means something very different to me, but the point is it mattered to each of us. So I'm with you, man.
yeah. When I think of, and to your point, when I think about the saying for your mom, because like you said, I mean, we had luckily both of our calendars for the most part were clear. I think you were late to a meeting after a
It was.
conversation that
It
day.
was well worth it.
That blew us by, but there were so many similarities in life experiences that you and I had with parents and all that stuff.
Right on.
So when I think about, tough people, I mean, tough times don't last, tough people do. Tough is one of those words that can mean insensitive
Sure.
in some ways. And when I hear it within the context of what you're talking about, it's not that.
Not at
It's a
all.
matter of when I know that this is the moment and there's hope and there's a light at the end of the tunnel, this too shall pass kind of thing.
Well said.
And the tough part is, do I have faith, belief, empowered to know that I got what it takes to get through, right? To get to that next level, to do that next thing.
Yep.
And I think in order for us as humans, i.e. leaders, because to me they're synonymous, we're leading ourselves before we lead anyone else. We have to believe that we're capable
Hmm.
of whatever challenge comes. Because if we don't believe it, the other option is we're sitting in victim mode.
Mm.
And victim mode is this terribly toxic, non-productive space that will literally suck the energy out of a room. And so when I hear that quote, I think about those layers underneath it, just when I start to unpack it.
It reminds me also, Michelle, and I'm just committed to this position that nearly everything in life, um, anything worth having, must be obtained after overcoming one or more struggles.
Mm,
And struggle is a loose term, but if I want to lose weight, I got to put in the work, and that's not fun. If I want to learn a second language, I gotta hunker down and get an app, like enroll in a course, watch Telemundo. It's if it were easy, everybody would do it.
mhm,
So the biggest reward come from the biggest overcoming of challenges, which is why it's really important as a leadership principle for me is we challenge each other, and then right behind
mhm,
that is we embrace challenge. Because if we're not going to embrace the challenge, let's just say we're subscribed to mediocrity, and what a soul-sucking existence that is,
mhm.
right?
So what was yours? So you and I chatted before I hit record, just around um, your journey and your learning and the decision that you made to step away from corporate America, right?
Mhm.
And the timing of that. Um, I'd love some highlights.
Yeah. Yeah, and my story is not unique. I don't consider myself special in any way. Certainly
Hmm.
not the smartest guy in the world. Um, but I have developed or did and continue to kind of hone the ability to connect with others.
Hmm.
So from a professional perspective, I spent nearly 30 years in corporate America leading really, really massive organizations. For some context, in my last two roles, I led north of 30,000 employees,
Hmm.
multi-billion dollar P&Ls, um, you know, locations in almost every state, and then at some point also having operations internationally. And I started like so many of us. I had a lot of optimism and eagerness when I came into the workforce. I started in a cubicle, the size of a bathroom stall, and managed to work my way up the ladder to the point where I had achieved nearly every kind of material success or the cliche type uh, criteria for success. By most accounts, I had a really successful career. But Michelle, the only thing that matched my pay increases and the sexy titles and the cool corner offices was the level of apathy that I began to develop towards the very environments that I was tasked to create, which is a real, I don't know if I can say this, it's a real, when you look
Mm-hmm.
around, you've created these environments and you're like, dude, I don't want to be a part of this, but I
Mm-mm.
built it in many cases. So I just hit a boiling point. My health was not great. I was on the doorstep of a divorce, which ultimately came to be.
Mm-hmm.
And I just realized that there had to be a better way. And I didn't know what that way was. So, fast forward a number of years, it was probably year 24 of my career when I just made a promise to myself that I wanted to lead differently, lead in a way that I'd never been led, but I was not clear on how. I knew
Mm.
what I wanted us to be, and I described that as a culture of excellence, but I struggled with the how. Um, and I thought, well, most organizations do a good job telling people how to do their job, the X's and O's, the standard operating procedures, those types of things. But I think most of us have not had a code of conduct taught to us or rules for behavior. So a principle is a fundamental truth. It's our foundation for a system of beliefs. And when I discovered that, I'm like, hang on a second. If I can get a group of people, my team, the group that I lead, to rally around and align behind a series of foundational beliefs, principles, I think we have a much better chance of success. But that's only going to happen if I take myself off this leadership pedestal that I had built over the course of 2 decades, put myself on a level playing field with my team and no leadership gap. What's good for me is good for you and vice versa. And actually live it every single day. Just live it every single day. And when I stumble or fail at living it, and when I say it, it's these principles, the 10 We's that I developed that are the foundation of the book you mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
When I set the expectations, we're all aligned around them. But when I stumble and I use my business card instead of being collaborative, or when I don't accept someone's challenge, as I mentioned, one of the challenges, we embrace challenges, I've got to be comfortable enough to hear, Kyle, you're being a hypocrite. Stop. Which is really hard to do. It's very hard, and I still struggle with it. But on the other
My
side of that
brain,
struggle, sorry,
yeah.
Michelle, please go
No,
ahead.
it's so funny when you say that because in my brain, you're saying these words like, this is it, and da da da, it's really hard and it's whatever. Um, like you were programmed at the core of who you
Was.
were and had habits and beliefs and all that stuff
Yep.
about you literally, I talk people, you bury yourself in a pile of shoulds. All this stuff that a leader at the level that you're at should or shouldn't do. And so while you're saying these words, got to line around principles, I've got to do all this stuff, and the team's got to come together. I know the work
Yeah.
involved in doing that. I've watched and helped coach people. I've coached
Yep.
myself, and
You know,
this is not easy stuff.
it's simple, but
Yeah,
it's not easy,
no,
right?
yeah.
Very
And
simple.
that's why I laugh and I smile because what you're describing is that's a friggin' heavy lift,
Yeah.
24 hours a day, 7 days a week, because you're going to kick yourself
Yep.
for even starting on that path.
Hmm.
And then your teams, you're having to rally them around it too. So now they're
Hmm.
having to lead differently and show up differently. And I'm sure not everyone made it through that.
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. So when I created these principles, the 10 We's, I shared them with the top 40 or 50 leaders of a 15,000 person organization
Mm-hmm.
about 60 days into my tenure. And I only created them because I knew I was going to be on stage with this group at a strategy session, and it would be my first time meeting with most of them. Um, and the night before, I thought this is I had a gut check moment, and I refer to it now as my epiphany. And it was in Lawrence, Kansas. This gut check moment was like, okay, dude, you took this role with the understanding you were going to lead differently. You promised yourself. Because Michelle, as you know, if I want the same results, which had been arguably very, very good, I had the
Mm-hmm.
recipe. Just do the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
But it was going to leave me, probably just as, if not more apathetic than I was when I started the gig.
Mm-hmm.
So I had to communicate something unique that the team had not heard before because they had seen guys and gals in my role come and go multiple times. The average tenure, by the way, of my direct reports was a dozen years. So they had seen it
Oh,
all, man.
yeah,
So for me to come in with the same starch corporate bullshit, it wasn't gonna
yeah,
work.
yeah.
And it was not easy. There were probably a quarter of the group of those 50 people that thought I was absolutely full of it. I'm truly
Oh,
the
I'm sure. No, I'm absolutely
yeah,
sure.
absolutely.
You
Now,
you got other people reporting to you at that level are also senior executives.
right.
And so they've, to your point, they've got their own experience. They're like, you're nuts, dude.
Who are you?
This is not
Who are
gonna
you,
be
new guy?
successful. And I'm not gonna risk my career in doing this.
Yep, that's right. And I'd like to say, and of course, there's no way to like thoroughly quantify this, but I'd like to say of that quarter that was obstinate at the time, I got probably more than half of them on board. It'd be naive to think that it was 100%.
Yeah.
You know that.
Yeah.
But what mattered, and by the way, the very next day, I never mentioned the principles again. I didn't commission any signage or any. We didn't make anything formal. It was ground up from that point. It was really a grassroots effort. But what they saw in me, I'd like to think, is a consistent connection to these principles,
Mm-hmm.
calling them out when I saw someone deviating and being
Mm-hmm.
open to being called out when I deviated, because I did. And I tell people, I gave a talk just yesterday to about 200 people in the title insurance business. It was an annual sales meeting for them. And I closed with, you have to make a choice. Like everything else in life, you have to make a choice. This will be harder. It will require more work. It's going to require a greater level of effort and time. So be ready for that. Make that choice. And then you know what you have to do the next day? You have to make the choice again.
Mm-hmm.
And many times throughout the day, it's almost in every interaction thing that you have to make those choices. And where I think most of us have gotten it wrong, including me, is that you set these grand visions for behavior or how you want your team to behave, but the first time there's adversity, you deviate from it, and the team's like, this isn't authentic. Like
Mm-hmm.
it's only convenient to Kyle when it's convenient to Kyle, and that was I made a commitment to myself to not allow that to happen, and it served me well.
It's I congratulate you
Thank you.
on doing that. It is not an easy journey.
Mhm.
And I think what happens, in fact, I know what happens because I've seen it, is when people get the sense that they see that consistency over time. And oh, by the way, like you said with the salespeople yesterday or when you
Yep.
did, it's really hard in the beginning. And it's really hard until it isn't. And then at
Awesome.
one point, you're gonna look around and go, I just did all that stuff and I didn't have to think about it. It
Right.
was just part of what I do and how I do it now. So it does happen. And what happens is when you have other leaders that are watching you do it and that consistency is there, and then you struggle and go back to the old way for a minute, and then you pick yourself up and hold yourself accountable. You don't knock them out, their knees out from underneath them when they give you feedback, because that's the biggest fear, or it's career limiting move for them, right? When they actually tell you what you're asking to hear, and then all of a sudden they're gone.
Yeah.
When none of that plays out, that they're still there, you're still in it, then you have people start looking, oh, by the way, the organization doesn't fall apart, right? It actually gets better.
Yeah.
Accountability goes up, engagement goes up, productivity goes up, sales go up, customer satisfaction goes up, all this stuff goes up,
Yep.
right? Because
Yep.
now you have this organization to where you're tapping into the creativity, and people have a desire to come to work. They're actually excited about it because
Mhm.
they have people that respect them. They're making a difference. They can see what they do and the impact on the organization. And that takes time. How long did it
Take your
take
time.
before that?
I don't know.
Okay.
I honestly don't know. During the Q&A yesterday, somebody asked me, "Hey, Kyle, if we were to adopt these principles as our manifesto, how long do you think we feel is how long until we reach that culture of excellence?" And I said, "I don't know. I don't know because I can't predict the number of times you won't make the right choice. I
Mm-hmm.
don't know what's happening inside your environment. I don't know how toxic or
Mm-hmm.
dysfunctional it is or it isn't. But I can tell you the way you framed it is perfect, Michelle. It will happen. It will happen.
Mm-hmm.
But gosh, it's not easy. And it does require a conscious choice over and over again. And I think, and you touched on this earlier, and I wanted to circle back to it because I think there's value, a lot of value in it. And that is, I was programmed. we are all programmed. I was a bang the fist on the desk type guy, and results at all costs. Didn't care if you had a sick child or an ailing parent at home. Like, you had these accountabilities, and you needed to deliver them. Because that's what I saw. That's what I was raised in corporate seeing. And there's this cycle that happens, and you know it better than I probably, is we're a product of what we see. And by the way, if I'm up for a promotion internally, and the hiring manager is someone that I don't respect or trust, I'm still going to imitate that behavior because he or she
Mhm.
is the one making the decision, telling me if I'm going to get a raise or not with this promotion.
Mhm.
So then I feel some type of indebtedness to that person. So I behave the same way. Oh, now it's time for me to hire someone. What happens? The replication continues
Mhm.
until somebody steps in the middle of this and says, enough. There is a better way. And now for your audience, I'm not naive. There are environments, and I've been in them. Not naive. There are
Yeah.
toxic environments where the toxicity and the dysfunction in the DNA of the company is just too deep. You will get there, but it could take longer than you have on this
Well,
planet, not in
and
the
it
role.
has to, and it's kind of like brain cells. Brain cells will always reproduce, right?
Yeah.
And eventually, and if you're young enough, they'll, fill in whatever you may have lost. The challenge is, are you older on the older end of it, like the hourglass, there's more sand in the bottom than the top, as someone told me one time,
Oh,
that you don't have enough time to repair all the damaged cells, but they
that's right.
will repair. It's
Good
whether or
one.
not you've got a long enough runway. I think the other part of it too is, and it's kind of like I went through a mold remediation in my house, even though it was like in the
Ooh.
ducts. But you can't do mold detox of your body until the source of the problem is gone. And it's kind of the same
Ooh.
thing with culture in an organization, right? So if
Ah,
you can work on parts of it, right? But if you don't get rid of the source of the mold,
what are we doing?
it's not going to work. And so that's where leadership has to hold leaders accountable for behaviors.
Oh,
And when
Michelle.
you have that stuff happening at the top of the house, it's the visual I would tell with leaders that would turn the tide where you did. So let's say toxic leadership at the top, right? So you've got a really great leader here, sitting here.
Yeah. Of
And back in the day, we had a video game, it was Zelda, Mario Brothers Zelda.
course.
And Zelda had little hearts to
Hmm.
indicate, the
Hmm.
strength of the power of Zelda. And then the hearts would go away, and then you had half a heart, and then there's blinking, right? The half a heart, because you're about ready to die.
Yeah.
That's leaders
Ooh.
in toxic organizations. And I tell them, I said, you're losing your hearts because they shield their teams
Yeah.
from this stuff
Yeah.
upstream. So I said, you need to figure out how you recharge your hearts. You're doing a great thing for your team, but you got to figure out how to recharge your hearts. And what happens is those leaders eventually just throw it in,
Yep.
because they
And
can't do it
succumb.
anymore. So you
Yeah.
have to deal with the source of the problem.
So what do you tell? So I agree. I couldn't agree more. But we've all been in that environment where even if I bring my best self to work and I shield my team from the jerk above me,
Mhm.
what do you tell people? Because I know what I tell people when there's someone above them that is just simply not open to change. But what do you tell
Mhm.
them? How do you tell, like, if I'm trying to drive massive change in an org and my boss says the right things, but his behavior is not aligned with what he's saying, what
Mhm.
do you tell them?
So here's where I'll start. So it's interesting. I went two different ways, right? Because one of them is there's a decision to make. If for some reason after you do this first thing I'm going to tell you, things still don't change
Hmm.
because the board or whoever it is isn't paying attention and doesn't care. But here's the first thing I'll tell you is don't worry about what happens here. Okay. Worry about what happens here. Because to your point, leadership is this at the level that you did. Yeah, I never led this way. Well, that's a lie. At one point, I led this way. When I was really leading, I was leading this way intentionally.
Okay.
And we are all equal part of the team. The difference is we have different roles.
Hmm.
So if it comes to accountability and performance conversations to where people aren't doing it, I'm going to step in and have those conversations. If the peer-to-peer is not working, I'm going to be there. That's my role.
That's your
But
job.
I'm going
Yep.
to have skin in the game like everyone else does.
Yep.
We've all got the same shared goals. We've all got the same accountability. I'm going to create an environment to where, you know what? I'm not going to have you thinking about whether or not you can help somebody else on the team because you haven't gotten your stuff yet.
Mm,
We're all going to be same skin in the game, right?
mm. Yep.
But the thing is, when you're in that situation, do the work, do the great work, engage with your team, do all that stuff and frickin' shine a light on it.
Mhm.
And people will start to notice in other parts of the organization. Because when you
Mhm.
shine a light on it, you shine a light on all the KPIs, all the measurements, all the stuff that people pay
Yep.
attention to.
Yep.
People are going to notice.
Yep.
You
Yep.
don't need to force it down. You don't need to cry wolf. You don't need to do anything else. And to me, that works. And then you have somebody else go, what are you doing over there? What's going
Magnetism.
on? Yeah.
Yep.
Because to me, that's the thing that works. And at some point, hopefully, further up the chain, somebody gets silenced or they don't have the strong voice that they had at one time. That being said, if that doesn't work, then you have a decision to make. But you don't become the sacrificial lamb in that situation because you have one life in this one body. That's my 2 cents.
Man, my answer is very, very similar, which shouldn't surprise either of
No,
us.
because we're
Uh,
related.
shouldn't surprise either of us.
Yeah, no.
Um, and I don't want I always struggle with not struggle with, but I'm always conscious of coming across in a way that appears out of touch or disconnected. So here's a guy
Mhm.
that led a bunch of people, made decent amount of cash and had these titles. So he doesn't really understand the plight of the mid-level manager. So I want to acknowledge that that is a concern of mine when we
Mhm.
have these conversations because perception and perspective is everything. But my where you and I are so aligned is that last part is if you have options and the thing I try to avoid from a naivete perspective is it's easy to say you have options. It's easy to say you have a decision to make. But on the other side of that decision, or probably right in front of that decision, I should say, is your electric bill, is your car payment, is your kid's college tuition, is commitments, right? So I'm always concerned or consider not coming across in a way that appears naive because if you are at the precipice of that decision and you say, yeah, but I gotta, this sucks. And I'm gonna have to probably lose some individuality. I'm gonna lose some of the things that make me me and allow me to be my best because I'm making the decision to continue to fulfill my commitments to support my family.
Mhm.
I got nothing but love for you.
Mhm.
Right? There's nothing wrong with that. You haven't lost, you don't lose. You and I just happen to know that if it is at all possible to make that change, even if that involves a lower title, maybe even slightly lower comp, the fulfillment and satisfaction that comes from getting to this place, however you want to quantify this place, is profound.
Mhm.
But not everybody, like when I made the decision, I stepped away from corporate America. I had a little nest egg that was going to allow me to sit on the bench. And I'm not naive that a lot of people don't have that opportunity.
Mm-mm. Mm-mm.
But if you don't have to succumb to that environment unless you make that conscious decision. The goal is to be aware that there are other options and try to pursue those options. Put yourself out there. But sometimes that's not realistic for some. And I just can't help but touch on that before
No, I
I don't
think
want to sound
it's
naive.
it's it's an important call out because the thing that comes to mind for me is I'm not advocating that you go F it and you leave,
Right.
right?
Right.
I
Although
think
sometimes that might be the right
yeah.
choice.
Yeah. No, I mean, a friend of mine, her husband did that, and he came home and said, "I quit my job," and she's like, "But what? What?
Oh,
What?"
yeah. You just want to be a little more
So
planful.
I'm
Yeah.
not. Yeah, I'm not. That's not what I'm saying.
Right.
But I think it's something and I encourage people that because these situations that you talk about that we're coming up against terrible bosses, challenging situations, all that stuff, that's actually life, all right, that we have.
It's all work.
And yeah, and that's where we grow.
Yep.
And so I've had plenty of leaders that I've coached that they're literally, I'm going to go and do this role over here. I'm going to go do this opportunity. I said, okay, so help me understand because you said this is what you wanted to do ultimately. How is that supporting?
How does it enable that? Yeah.
Exactly. Well, it doesn't. And I said, okay, so here's the thing. It's okay to run to something, but don't run away from
Don't run
something.
away. Yeah, you are my
And
sister.
that's the big difference, right? And so be strategic. Don't
Yep.
wait until you're on your last nerve of
Yep.
whatever before you go, okay, I'm going to look. Don't wait till then.
Yeah.
Because if you wait till then, the energy and the human that shows up in those interviews is desperate. You don't
Mm,
want to walk in with desperate energy ever.
yeah.
So
Yeah.
do it when you know that, let's get curious. Let me do, what else is out there? I don't know what I don't know.
Yeah. Michelle, would you agree a major component, if not the number one component, that allows us to start to ask those questions and make those decisions is self-reflection?
Oh, how are you going to know
Yeah.
unless you set the intention to find out?
Yeah. So why isn't it more common then?
Because it takes time
Yeah.
and it's scary if
It's
you're
scary as
honest.
shit. Yeah. That's
If
right.
you're honest, it's scary.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and I think there's
Because
another element that, we just, we are, many of us, myself included, we're creatures of habit and we get
hmm
wired, and you use the word programmed. And I think it's the perfect word.
hmm
I met a guy on a plane not long ago, sitting next to me. I had my laptop open and I was working on a presentation, a keynote I was going to deliver. This was a few months ago. And I could feel the guy,
looking.
I could feel it. And then I looked and I saw it.
Well, because his energy was coming into your aura, your space, your field,
Absolutely. And
right?
I'm a big personal space guy. So at
Yeah.
first I was
Yeah.
like, come on, dude, like
Yeah.
back up. So at the end of the flight, I closed my laptop and he leans over, and the guy was probably early 30s. And he said, "Hey man, what do you do?" And I said, "I'm an author and I do some speaking and coaching and stuff." And he says, "Well, what do what is the focus on?" Looked like it was like work stuff. I said, "Yeah, yeah. I try to, help
It
bosses become
looked like
leaders."
it was work stuff.
It looked like it was work stuff. Cut to the chase. The
Yeah.
guy says, I mentioned, there's a better way, because he was kind of complaining about his job. And he said, "Well, I just always assumed you go to college, you graduate, you take a job, you end up really hating your job. But then you have these." He walked through the whole cliche, and he was not, he was serious. Like, this is
That was
how
his
this is supposed.
expectation.
Yes. Yes.
There's
That was his
nothing else.
expectation.
That's all
Yes.
there is. I'm
Uh,
living the dream.
so is program the right word or what, man?
Yes. Oh yeah.
You nailed it. You
Yeah.
nailed it.
Programmed expectations. Yeah.
Yep.
You and I could probably blow right through whatever time that a leadership soundbite should be. I wholeheartedly would love to have you back on at some point in time when you have
Be my
time.
honor.
I um, and just enjoy your perspective, and I think it will resonate with a number of people as you've been tapped for your book and speaking engagements and everything else. Curious though, Kyle, what one or two things would you love people to walk away with around this stuff that we've chatted about today?
I'm gonna continue the theme with, there is a better way.
hmm
There is a better way. And if you're searching for that way, uh, the path for me, and it doesn't mean it's the path for everyone, that has created more fulfillment and had a greater impact than probably my first 2 decades combined,
hmm
is establishing my leadership principles. These are the things that we'll be known for. These are the things that you can expect from me. They're the things I can expect from you. Again, principles aligning around our fundamental truths. So if you're curious for a better way, to find that better way, job one is establishing those principles. What can the team expect from me? And what do
hmm
I expect from them? That's to me number one. Then it's, as we mentioned earlier, it's not a light switch. I don't make the choice and establish these principles. I got to communicate them. I got to set expectations around them. I got to live them every single day, every interaction. So that's probably the one and only thing I would love for folks to take away. I happen to have created some principles that have been really, really helpful in my personal and professional lives. And at this point, via the book, having sold tens of thousands of copies, I'm convinced.
Congratulations, by the way. That's
Thank you.
awesome.
Thank you very. I'm convinced that, these principles, the 10 We's, have a place in the world. And if you're struggling to find what your leadership principles look like, give these a try.
hmm I love that. I think the other that I go back to, some people go 10, that's a lot. It's a lot of change, a lot of whatever. And so here's what I'll say. What's a little bit better look like?
Yeah.
Start small.
Yeah. Well
Just start
said.
small. You don't
That's right.
have to take the whole we principle blanket and wear it every day.
So true.
You can start with just little things.
Hmm.
Get those ingrained and then add on another thing or maybe two. And what happens is the more we ingrain this into who we are, the more we develop the habits of leading in this way, the easier it is.
Reps.
So
Put in the
because
reps. Yep.
yes, yeah. So that's what I would say and add on to that, because I agree. It's like we need some guiding something, to get us through. The we part of it is you're not on an island. You're not Tom Hanks in the FedEx plane that crashed, for God's sakes,
Wilson.
right?
Yeah.
And so, you have humans around you. You have a whole world that's connected, ready to help. And this is a scary part for a lot of people. And so I'll say this, we have to let people in.
Yeah. And by the way, it's a dance. It's a dance. And when I make room for my partner, the team I lead,
Hmm.
um, there's now space for them to step forward.
Hmm.
And that's what we're talking about, right? Nobody wants to be managed. We want to
Hmm.
be led.
Hmm.
And I think that's a beautiful metaphor that when I step back and don't need to be the right person, the loudest voice, have all the answers, it just opens up so much room for others to do that.
And it's so much easier for you.
That's the
I
beauty.
mean, oh
That's the
my God.
beauty.
It's like when you step in telling yourself, I'm the answer person, I got to have it all, I got to have a solution. I mean, come on. So basically, I need to be Superman. And the chat GPT, I've got to have all the answers. And I'm going to hallucinate, whatever it is. It's a daunting expectation. And
It
there's no
is.
human on the planet that can thrive in those conditions.
We need others.
So
Amen.
it's just a better way to lead.
Yeah.
It's just easier.
Yeah.
So,
Ultimately, yeah, it's hard. It's harder to get quote unquote there.
yes.
But when you're there, like your team members answer, they can finish your sentences and vice
Yeah.
versa. There's no
Yeah.
ambiguity about how we handle things.
And it's so respectful of other
Yeah.
people.
Yeah. It's beautiful.
So, yeah, I just thank you, thank you, thank you. So, until next time, this has been Leadership Soundbites. Please like, share, subscribe. I will put Kyle's information in the description on the podcast, and have a freaking awesome day. Thank you.